All right, good morning. We're back again. It's been the 4th of July. Did you have a good 4th? Did you see fireworks and all that stuff? Well, Amos, as we talked about last week, he could have created fireworks. He didn't make people happy when he preached. Today's story is a bit different. We're in the New Testament. We are in the time of Jesus, and in particular is in Jesus. We're in Matthew chapter 8. I'm just going to read the beginning of it. It's a consecutive part. It's the story of the healing of the centurion's servant. And we have different words. We're going to read from Luke as well. Luke chapter 7. There's going to be a couple contrasts. But here's how it begins. When Jesus had come down from the mountain, great crowds followed him. That's the mount of where he was teaching. Sermon on the Mount is chapters 5, 6, and 7 in terms of Matthew. 8 is he's come off the mountain and he's going to his home, not Nazareth. It will be a different place. When Jesus came down from the mountain, great crowds followed him, and there was a leper who came to him and knelt before him, saying, Lord, if you choose, you can make me clean. And he does make him clean. He touches him and heals him. Now, Jesus is unclean at this point. To touch a leper who hasn't been declared clean by the priest, it makes you unclean as well. So he's unclean. Now that's going to condition a little bit of his ministry in the next person. All right, so he finishes up there, and then he heals that person. And then it says, when he entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, appealing to him and saying, Lord, my servant is lying at home paralyzed and in terrible distress. Matthew mentions the paralysis and the distress, or the pain, we might say that there's it. Now, Jesus has just healed a leper, all right? And he said to him, I will come and cure him. Jesus is not bound by the rules of the law. If you make someone clean, if you heal someone, you are not necessarily contaminated. He is willing to come to the centurion's house to heal him. Now, the centurion answered him and said, I am not worthy for you to come to my house. Just speak, and it'll be healed. Now, we'll stop there because I want to go over to Luke chapter 7 and read how it is worded there. It's a very interesting change. After Jesus had finished all his sayings, that's again the Sermon on the Mount, in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. A centurion there had a slave whom he valued highly. Interesting statement. He values this servant. It's a very special servant to him. Now the servant could be smarter and more well-educated than the centurion himself. The centurion is an official soldier in the Roman army. Some of the commentators say that being a centurion, that means a commander of 100. Being a centurion is equivalent to being a sergeant in our army. I think it would really be a higher rank, perhaps more like a second lieutenant, maybe even a first lieutenant. He's in charge of 100 people. That's a lot of people. And in Israel, you had centurions stationed at different places. You'll remember that Peter in Acts chapter 10 is staying at the house of a tanner in Joppa. A centurion sends his messengers to that because he's had a dream and a vision that says, you go to Joppa, there'll be a man there named Peter, and he will come and explain to you who Jesus is. Now, this centurion is known in Acts chapter 10 as a God-fearer. I think the centurion at Capernaum is a God-fearer. I'm going to tell you why in a moment. He is happy to be stationed in Israel. Most people didn't want to be, Pilate did not want to be stationed in Israel. It was a punishment for something that he had failed to do. Okay, this centurion and the centurion in Joppa, the neighboring town of Caesarea, wanted to be there because there was something about the Jewish people and their worship that drew them as authentic. and real. Now, here's the difference that happens here. Centurion was there with a slave who was valued highly, who was ill and close to death. He is very ill. Close to death. When he heard about Jesus, now that's an interesting statement. When he heard about Jesus, Matthew doesn't mention that, hearing about Jesus. But how would the centurion hear about Jesus? Now, the centurion is stationed at Capernaum. Jesus has made Capernaum his headquarters. How do you suppose he heard about him? Okay, I'm going to pick it up. Here it goes. When he heard about Jesus, he sent some Jewish elders to him, asking him to come and heal his slave. In Luke's account, it's Jewish elders that go to see Jesus. Now, you got to remember, many of the Jews didn't like Jesus. But it must have been that this centurion heard about Jesus through these Jewish elders who had something positive to say about Jesus. And as we'll note, they had something positive to say about the centurion. Now, you might have heard of James and John and Peter. We know Peter lived in Capernaum. That's where he was speaking at one point, and some friends brought a man who was paralyzed and lowered him through a roof they tore up. That was in Capernaum as well. Anyway, let me read on here. When he had heard about Jesus, he sent some Jewish elders to him, asking him to come and heal the slave. When they came to Jesus, they appealed to him. These Jewish elders are begging Jesus, come. Why are they begging him to come? They begged him to come earnestly, saying, he, that is the centurion, is worthy. Isn't it interesting? The centurion in Matthew's account says, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy to have you come under my roof. I know that I'm not one of your promised people, but I came here to learn about this God, and learning about him, I've heard of you. All right? He is worthy of having you do this for him. This is why. For he loves our people, and it is he who built our synagogue for us. This centurion took his own personal money and built a house of worship for the Jewish people of Capernaum. That's what. Contrast that with Amos that we had last week, and they have religious ceremonies and stuff, but it's empty. Here's a centurion who's come and found hope in these Jewish people and built them a synagogue. Built it for them. His job is to rule these people. His job is to keep them in line. But he sees them not as an enemy, but as an asset. As a person that he can relate to, as a people that he can be with. That's tremendous as far as I can consider. Now, both situations are going to happen here next. If you go back to Matthew's account, the centurion says, I'm not worthy to have you come under my roof. Just speak the word and it'll be healed. In this situation, the centurion comes with other friends and he says, I'm not worthy, just speak the word and my servant will be healed. In both situations, there is this sense of, I don't have to have you come and touch him. Now the leper, Jesus touched. This person who's ill, there's no necessary thought that he is unclean. He's ill. He's got a disease that could kill him. And the centurion wants this servant because he highly values him. Not just because he's good merchandise, but because he's valuable as a person to him. And so Jesus will speak and he'll say, I haven't ever seen faith like this in all of Israel. Now he's saying that with the Jewish elders right there. He's saying that with his disciples nearby. He said, people will come from the north and west and east and south. And they will be spoken of as having a greater faith than I found here in Israel. I think that's a tremendous thing. But I contrast it with also Jesus' sermon, his inaugural sermon in Luke, where he preaches in his hometown synagogue, and he says, there were many lepers in Israel at the time of Elisha the prophet. But Elisha wasn't sent to any of the lepers in Israel. He was sent to a leper from Syria named Naaman. Now Naaman came to Israel to talk to Jesus because he had a slave who was a little Jewish girl, and she said, you need to talk to the prophet. He can help you. You know, he couldn't go with his soldiers. With leprosy, he was unclean. And when he came to Elisha, the prophet said, you go dip in the Jordan River 7 times. Now, Naaman came with money to pay for this. Elisha didn't want any money. He just said, go in the river, dip 7 times. He was so mad that it was bad. His slave girl was with him. Brought her, of course she did. She took care of him, his needs and stuff. And she said, well, if he had asked for a big sum of money, you would have said, okay, I'll get it. If he had asked you to bring him some reward or something, you would have done it. He didn't ask for anything. What is wrong with dipping in the Jordan River 7 times? Well, we have rivers back in Syria that are better rivers than the Jordan. Probably did. Nothing. Dip in the river, boss. And he did, and he was healed. Now, Jesus mentions that in his inaugural sermon. A lot of lepers in Israel, but the only one that was healed was Naaman, the leper, with Elisha. Now, you'll also say there were many widows in Israel at the time of Elijah. But he wasn't sent to any of those widows. He was sent to Zarephath, outside of the land of Israel. And he provided food for a woman who was going to cook her last meal, and with her son died because they had no more resources. And Elijah had her make the bread for them, and it kept coming. The flour kept flowing, and the wine kept flowing. And she was able to make so much bread and sell to provide for their being. Well, the people were very upset. But you see, Jesus was saying, God is a cosmic God. He thinks in bigger terms. And the prophet said, my thoughts are not your thoughts. For as the heavens are high above the earth, so are my thoughts higher than your thoughts, and my deeds than yours. So this message of the centurion is a reminder that God has people in every land and in every situation that he's calling to be a part of his church. Jesus will finish up by saying, look, the fields are white unto the harvest. Pray the Lord of harvest to send forth harvesters to gather the harvest. We have a story here of where one person has been gathered in to be part of the harvest. And that's a wonderful statement. And I appreciate the centurion saying, I'm not worthy. Well, he is worthy. He would have been made a centurion if he hadn't had some skills and abilities. The Jewish people say he's worthy. Look what he's done for us. He hasn't treated us poorly. He has loved us. And we love him. Great lessons there for us all. Well, we have to leave it at that. We'll pick it up next week as we look at more people from the New Testament. Father, we ask you to help us to see how your mind and your heart and your love is much greater than ours. And you have dreams for people from all countries and ages and places to be your followers. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, see you next week.